Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we have a special guest, the Punisher. No, we're not talking about Frank Castle, who was last spotted seeking redemption in the alternate realm of Weird World. We're talking about the new rogue vigilante on the block who lost his family in a tragic incident and swore vengeance on those responsible. Marvel's longtime Punisher, Frank Castle's denouncement of the title paved way for the former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Joe Garrison to fill the position, albeit unintentionally on his part. In the November 2023 issue of The Punisher, Marvel introduced the new assassin, the nemesis of criminals, in the form of Joe Garrison, who came with the tagline, "The man is different, the mission remains the same." If you haven't had a chance to grab the new Punisher comic just yet, we're here to tell you all about the new guy. So let's begin, shall we? Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means an awful lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The tragic backstory of Joe Garrison. So, who is Joe Garrison? Is he related to Frank Castle in Marvel's comic book universe? The answer is no. Do they have strikingly similar backgrounds? Well, that much is true. Before Marvel's espionage agency S.H.I.E.L.D. was disbanded, Joe Garrison was among the creme de la creme of the spy network, and he was known as the agency's gravedigger. He accomplished the Black Op missions which others couldn't, successfully eliminating top-ranking Hydra agents and obliterating Latverian operation bases. Meanwhile, as a cover, Joe was simply an accountant to his friends and his neighbors. After his retirement from S.H.I.E.L.D., Joe wanted to devote all his time to his family of four, composed of his wife Stephanie and their little kids Danny and Laura. One fateful day, Joe was on his way back from grocery shopping when the Garrison house exploded, killing his family in front of his very eyes. Joe was overwhelmed by the haunting realization that he may have left his S.H.I.E.L.D. days behind, but somebody found me out and made my family pay the price for my sins. It was the doing of a terrorist named the Sokovian, on the instructions of what appears to be one of Joe's old foes. Consumed with grief, Joe turned to violence to beat violence, and began operating from hidden S.H.I.E.L.D. bases along with the help of his former handler, AAA. By the way, the Garrison family murder was staged to look like Joe orchestrated the whole thing, making him the prime suspect in the case. So, while he's on the hunt for the Sokovian, the authorities are on the hunt for him. Anger, grief, and a determination for vengeance, combined with an impressive weapon collection from his days at S.H.I.E.L.D., made Joe a formidable anti-hero, who was dubbed as the Punisher by the media. Joe's S.H.I.E.L.D. armor, which had a chest plate that assembled into the shape of a skull, added to the hype, thus establishing that a new Punisher was out there to demolish evildoers, and the word mercy wasn't in his dictionary. Joe Garrison is, in many ways, very similar to his predecessor, the most significant similarity being their tragic past and loss of loved ones. For the uninitiated, Frank Castle was a former U.S. Marine who served in several war theaters before finally returning to his family of four, composed of his wife Maria and their two kids. He subsequently led a simple life, taking up a job at the meatpacking district. During a visit to Central Park, Frank and his family unwillingly witnessed a crime with the Mafia involved. Fearing that there were eyewitnesses to their mob killing, the Mafia gunned down Frank's entire family, while he survived the massacre and subsequently vowed to unleash his wrath on the criminal underworld. Thus, both Joe Garrison and Frank Castle were motivated by grief to punish the evildoers. In recent years, the Punisher's signature skull logo became controversial as it was adopted as the symbol of several crime groups in the real world, prompting Marvel to tweak the sign in the last issue of the Punisher comics featuring Frank Castle. This explains why Joe Garrison was deliberately not given a defined skull symbol on his chest. However, interestingly enough, his S.H.I.E.L.D. armor comes with a chest plate that looks an awful lot like a skull, with additional elements contributing to the unintentional Punisher logo. Since we're on the Frank Castle topic, let's hear how he was made to disappear from the comics, paving the way for Joe Garrison to emerge as the new Punisher. Amid questions concerning Frank Castle's role in modern comics, in order to give the character one final run in the storyline, he was made to retire as the Punisher and take on the job of the leader of a group of ninja warriors named the Hand, serving their top boss, the Beast. Gradually, Frank was done with the ancient society's fanatic ways and, using their magic, escaped into the realm of the Weird World, where he began aiding refugee kids to escape from the war-torn world. The terrifying story arc of Joe Garrison. In the 2023 Punisher comics, Joe makes a promising entry by barging into the Black Dragon Club hideout, bustling with the Inner Demons gang members, and issuing the threat, "You all have one chance to make it out of here alive, and that's if you give me exactly what I want." Joe was looking for one of Interpol's most wanted assassins, Sergei Fedorov, aka the Sokovian, who murdered his family and then hired the Inner Demons to keep him safe. While Joe took out the thugs one by one, resulting in an absolute bloodbath, the Sokovian Sokovian escaped the club, but not before his briefcase took a hit from the Reaper bullet, which is a special bullet with a tracking device built into it, the creation of Joe's trusted handler, AAA. The name actually stands for Arms and Analysis, but once she started helping Joe off the record, she joked about her name meaning aiding and abetting. AAA also doubles up as Joe's mission manager and occasional voice of reason. Following the massacre at the club, an eyewitness revealed that the guy at the center of the mass shooting had the impression of a skull on his chest. This prompted the media to speculate that the Punisher was back in action. You heard it here first. Is this the return of Frank Castle, or is there a new Punisher on the loose? And can authorities stop him before it's too late? Joe Garrison blamed it on the chest plates of his shield armor, which were shaped like a skull. Two luminescent impressions on the armor made it look like eye sockets, while the ammo belt around his waist gave the impression of a mount. Joe wasn't too bothered by his new title, which actually worked in his favor, as he presumed that because of it, the authorities would look in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, tracking the signal from the Reaper bullet, the Sokovian's location was revealed to be inside a subway, with the tunnels blocking out his exact location. As Joe took off on his bike for one final face-off with his family's killer, he was reminded of the promise he made to his wife to never go back to the assassination business. A memory flashes through Joe's mind in which the couple is spending a day together by the lake with their kids playing around them. In the flashback, Joe apologizes to Stephanie for always being on duty, when she comforts him with the thought that that's all in the past and that things are now looking up for the Garrison family. It all feels perfect, maybe too perfect, were his thoughts before the fateful day arrived. Meanwhile, inside the subway tunnel, the Sokovian bartered a deal with the chaotic and savage Dr. Calvin Zabo. He asked for protection and safe passage out of the country in exchange for $10 million worth of the mutant growth hormone. There is a man pursuing me, but I cannot risk exposing my masters further, says the Sokovian, prompting Dr. Zabo to respond, for that kind of generous donation, we'll gladly put the Punisher in a body bag. Using S.H.I.E.L.D.'s biometric technology, Joe tracked down the Sokovian and walked into a tunnel full of Dr. Zabo's armored thugs. Joe fished out the railgun and with its magnetizing features took down Zabo's army. That's when the unholy snapping of bones and the sickening groan of muscles echoed through the tunnel walls as Zabo transformed into his monstrous alter ego, Mr. Hyde. An alarmed AAA, who was connected with Joe through an earpiece, summed up Mr. Hyde's menacing resume as a former chemist turned freak of science, who mutated into his grotesque and colossal form by experimenting with a super steroid. He's even battled Thor head-on. Mr. Hyde proved impervious to the Punisher's weaponry and almost tore the Punisher in half when Joe pierced one of his eyes with an electrified taser spike, blinding him partially. Joe survived a power-packed punch from Mr. Hyde that put a fist-sized dent into the Sokovian briefcase. He was almost eaten alive when, bingo, he grabbed an obscene amount of mutant growth hormone from the briefcase and stuffed it in Mr. Hyde's mouth, causing the criminal doctor to overdose and mutate into a freakish form. As he collapsed onto the tunnel floor, it generated shockwaves strong enough to launch the Punisher away from him. With Mr. Hyde incapacitated, the Punisher chased the Sokovian through the subway station when he took an innocent woman hostage. Holding a knife to her throat, the Sokovian yelled out at the Punisher, "I know your weakness. You wish to protect so-called innocents, don't you?" Meanwhile, all the Punisher could think about was not letting the Sokovian escape, as he desperately needed to know who hired him to murder his family and burned his last chance at a normal life. The Punisher and the Sokovian, positioned on opposite platforms, were separated by a roaring train, which made it impossible for Joe to capture the assassin. But trust the Punisher to do the impossible, as he fired a 1 in a million shot through the open train doors and pierced the Sokovian's skull. This climactic moment led Joe Garrison to fully embrace his renewed identity as the Punisher, prompting him to say, "The Sokovian's punishment may be over, but I know mine has only just begun." On his earpiece, the Punisher tells AAA, "I'm ready to get back to work," thus ushering in a new era of Punisher comics. Writer David Pepose is the man behind the new Punisher comics, with sketches by David Watcher and coloring by Dan Brown. In an interview, Pepose describes the Joe Garrison version of the Punisher with these words, "I've pitched this Punisher series as John Wick meets The Fugitive, where Joe's opening mission, and sort of our origin story with him, is him trying to figure out who set him up and why." Joe Garrison's powers and abilities explained. Traditionally, the Punisher's reputation for murder, torture, and coercion precedes him. In Joe Garrison's case, all that is enhanced by the impressive cachet of S.H.I.E.L.D. weapons at his disposal, the brilliant tech-savvy AAA as his mission guide, and his extensive combat training from his S.H.I.E.L.D. days. During his first action sequence in the comics, the Punisher walked into the lair of the dreaded Mr. Negative's army of inner demons and took them out one by one with twin guns and his fine abilities as a former S.H.I.E.L.D. assassin. He shattered their electrified swords and spears with his combat skills while simultaneously firing firing his gun. He tackled the strongest one with a brutal punch that broke the thug's metal mask in half before lighting up the rum-soaked demon with a lighter, setting the entire club ablaze. The Reaper bullets were an ingenious creation of AAA, who built a tracking system inside each of them, enabling the bullets to emit a signal strong enough to show up on her screen at the secret shield bunker. The Reaper bullets that latched onto the briefcase of the Sokovian led the Punisher to their climactic battle in the subway tunnel. The Punisher's dexterity with the super advanced railgun was pretty impressive. When shooting rounds at full magnetic charge, the railgun was powerful enough to pierce through a military tank. The Punisher, given his former training at S.H.I.E.L.D., knew just how to manipulate the gun's magnetic frequency so as to convert any metal around it into magnets while firing around. With this feature, the Punisher disbalanced the armor thugs, causing their weapons to fly out of their hands. With this much stopping power, who needs to reload, right? However, the Punisher's firepower was eclipsed by Mr. Hyde's superhuman abilities, prompting Joe to remember his training that, in my hands, every opportunity becomes a weapon. He first destroyed Mr. Hyde's left eye with a taser spike, and then force-fed Mr. Hyde the mutant growth hormone. Joe Garrison and AAA operate out of bunkers that S.H.I.E.L.D. secretly created and concealed at locations across New York City. When embarking on missions, Joe Garrison rides a jet black motorbike that matches his S.H.I.E.L.D. armor. Marvelous verdict! So that's it, folks. All about the new Punisher's complicated origin story and background. The biggest challenge of creating a ruthless assassin like the Punisher is perhaps how to make the readers sympathetic towards the character. This explains the Punisher's backstory of the family massacre, but in Joe Garrison's case, he has also been framed as the murderer of his loved ones, which calls for an extra layer of sympathy for the character. Do you think Joe Garrison will be able to uphold Frank Castle's bloody legacy as the killer of killers? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and if you liked our video, give us a shout out and watch this space for more marvelous content. See you next time.